This is a protest of epic proportions. I'm standing right in front of Fifth Avenue, the same Fifth Avenue where President Donald Trump said that he could famously shoot somebody and get away with it. Right now, there are over 100,000 people filling that same street saying that they want no kings in their government.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. The contrast we saw this weekend between the millions of Americans who turned out for the No Kings protests and the pathetic display in Washington, D.C., where soldiers were forced to parade in front of Donald Trump, that split screen could not have been more different. I'm going to give in to the temptation here for just a minute to gloat, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I know we live in dangerous times, and these grotesque tributes to a would-be king by our military are no laughing matter. But these are scenes from that parade. Even Donald Trump looks bored out of his mind. And I'm not playing with the sound here. That squeaking tank passing mostly empty stands is straight out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. If I had the rights to the clown car music, I'd play it. All right, that's as much fun as I'm going to have with this because the reality is dark. This president, for as unpopular as he now is with so many Americans, still has so much power. He has done what we feared he would do. He has placed die-hard loyalists who will obey his every command in charge of every element of the national security state. The FBI and Department of Justice, the intelligence community, the Department of Homeland Security, and increasingly, even the military are bending to his will. The day may soon come when people power, along with a few brave judges and blue state governors, are all we're left with to stop him. In my last episode, I shared part one of my conversation with retired four-star General Stanley McChrystal, who I have known and admired for over a decade. We talked about whether the character of the U.S. military will be enough to help it resist the autocratic impulses of its commander-in-chief. In part two, General McChrystal challenges an idea that many in the military take for granted, American exceptionalism. He says that if we are counting on that myth about America to protect us from descending into tyranny, we're going to lose this democracy. I won't give away the rest. Here's General Stanley McChrystal.
I don't think we're exceptional. I think we have been an exceptional country. Our history shows exceptional accomplishments, but those were done by mostly the people before us, and they're not around anymore. And so what America is what America actually is right now. It's what we are doing right now, how we are treating ourselves and each other right now. And our perception, the perception of us by people around the world and internally, is based upon what we are doing. And so if we want to be viewed a certain way, we have to behave a certain way as individuals, as organizations, and as a nation. And I think that we would be arrogant in the extreme to think that just because we're Americans, we have the right answer, or that we are going to get the right outcome by what we do, or that we can push against boundaries which were put in place by really smart people because they knew men weren't perfect. And so if you read the Federalist Papers, you understand that the Constitution and resulting amendments were based on the recognition that people are human and that we'll drive off the rails given the opportunity.
But even with that, I am going back more and more often to the Madisonian observation, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but he basically said the survival of democracy will ultimately rest on the virtue of men, meaning that all the guardrails in the world aren't going to save us if the men, of course, at that time it was all men, if the men manning the posts are bad. And we might be in a situation now where we are testing the democracy and its dependence on the virtue of men because the guardrails are being obliterated by the minute.
Yeah. And I think that's true. What I would say is the challenge for us, and we really need to think this through, is our processes to select the people who lead us have to include virtue. Because if it does not, if we elect people who are of a character that's not accretive to our nation, we're going to get an outcome we don't want. And in an age where social media and regular media and wealth and celebrity and all, they come together in sort of this corrupted way to celebrate people of certain activities, but very rarely ask the question, but what's their character? Because once it gets ugly, you go back to James Stockdale, the famous prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton. He pointed out that the people with the strongest character, they survived best when everything got very difficult. And I would argue now that the people of the strongest character are going to survive best. They will be best to help our democracy survive. Absent those kinds of people, who's in the room to do it?
Hey, it's Ken Harbaugh. Huge shout out to everyone who has supported this show via our Patreon page. If you want to weigh in with questions for upcoming guests or give us feedback on past guests or make sure you never miss an episode, click the link below. It's free to sign up. And if you're able to pitch in a few bucks a month, just know that we put every dollar back into the show. We do have another reporting trip to Ukraine coming up. Thanks for the help. I take it you don't have a lot of faith in the current political system to select those people. I heard you in a recent interview say something about how when people come to you asking if they should run for office, your response is, I think you'd be great for that, but I'm afraid the process is going to turn you into a different person, and I would mourn that transformation. That is a pretty damning indictment of how electeds gain power in this country.
Yeah. I admit to being a closet idealist, and I go back to, Mr. Smith goes to Washington. Jefferson Smith goes as a young senator to work for his nation. And he finds out that things are not like he hoped they were. His closest colleague is corrupt. And there's the option at any moment that he could actually just adopt that as his values and mores and habits. And I think back, that was in 1939, they made that, at least we depicted in the movie at that point, that was not the norm. That was not acceptable. I would argue now what we've got is a system where you are incentivized to lie. You are incentivized to do things in politics that I think all of us think are distasteful at best. And yet you won't succeed if you don't, because you're worried about being primaried or any of those things. So what you do is you accommodate. You say, well, I'm a good person. I got elected for good reasons. I think most people who get elected are, but then they realize the only way I can stay in Congress is if I do this, if I get along. And you have a rationalization that says, well, I can't do any good for the nation or my district if I'm not in Congress. So I have to do what it takes to stay in Congress so that I can do this good. And I would argue that over time, what happens is the cumulative amount of negative things you do way outweighs the good most are able to do. And so we've taken good people and we've diminished them.
Last question. I'm wondering if you've thought about the relationship between character and character development and shame. And I've been thinking a lot about shame in our political culture these days and how we just took it for granted up until just a few years ago that it had a shaping influence. But when shamelessness trumps shame, pun intended, it fundamentally alters our calculations about character, how we think about shaping character. It has changed how I think about fatherhood, something that fundamental. When a society abandons the concept of shame, it changes everything.
Well, I think that's the key point, Ken, really, if you get down to it, because there are certain things we don't do because we shouldn't do them, and we'd be ashamed if it was revealed that we do them. Stealing, lying, all of those kinds of things. And the fact that we don't want our children or our grandchildren or our peers to have that view of us. If we are cut free of that limitation, where we simply don't care, we can look people in the eye and say, yeah, I stole it and I got away with it. What's your problem? Then we're at a completely different place. What holds society together? We say, well, the rule of law. Well, the rule of law are designed to control certain things. The reality is the norms and the idea that we don't want to be shamed, limits us much more. And so it's a tricky situation right now.
It is. Well, Stan, thank you so much for joining us. I would love to check in with you again soon. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for all you're doing, Ken.
New Meidas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.MeidasTouch.com.